Most people believe that if they work hard enough, everything will eventually work out. They believe that effort is the answer, that persistence guarantees progress, that sacrifice will be rewarded in the end. But if that were true, why are so many hard-working people struggling more than ever? Why do people who wake up early, stay late, and do everything right still feel stuck, still anxious about money, still one unexpected bill away from stress? Hard work isn't rare, it's everywhere. Yet financial freedom is not. That disconnect isn't an accident, and it isn't your fault. The truth is, hard work alone has never been the thing that creates wealth. It never has. And for most people, it never will. In this video, I'm going to explain why. Not with motivation, not with hype, and not with shortcuts, but by breaking down the quiet decisions, the invisible systems, and the long-term dynamics that actually separate those who struggle from those who don't. We'll look at why effort is often misdirected, how small choices quietly compound over time, and why two people with the same income can end up living completely different lives. This isn't about getting rich quick, it's about thinking clearly. Because once you understand why hard work alone doesn't work, you can stop blaming yourself and start positioning your life differently. And that changes everything. From a very young age, most of us are taught the same message. Pay attention, follow instructions, do well in school, get a good job. It sounds sensible, responsible even. But hidden inside that message is an assumption that almost no one ever questions. The assumption is that if you are reliable enough, skilled enough, and hardworking enough, security will follow. So we learn to associate safety with approval, and approval with stability. At school, the goal isn't independence, it's compliance. You're rewarded for sitting still, meeting deadlines, and doing what you're told. Creativity is allowed, but only within boundaries. Curiosity is encouraged, but only if it doesn't disrupt the system. This doesn't make school bad, it makes it effective at producing dependable workers. And that pattern continues into adulthood. You're taught to trade hours for money, to measure progress by promotions, to see consistency as virtue and risk as danger. The idea of stepping outside that structure often feels irresponsible, even reckless. Not because it is, but because it was never normalized. Hard work in this system becomes about endurance, about tolerating pressure, about pushing through. And for many people, that's where the story ends. They work harder, they become more efficient, they take on more responsibility, but their income grows slowly, if at all. Their time disappears, and the ceiling above them never really moves. The problem isn't laziness, it's direction. Effort applied inside a system designed for stability will usually produce stability, not freedom. And yet, when progress stalls, the instinct is always the same. Work harder, try more, push through. Very few people ever stop to ask a more uncomfortable question. What if the issue isn't effort at all? What if the system itself limits the upside? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. You can be incredibly hardworking and still be stuck. You can be talented and still capped. You can do everything right and still feel like you're falling behind. Not because you failed, but because you were trained for reliability, not leverage. The world rewards outcomes, not effort. And outcomes depend on structure, where your effort is placed, how it scales, and whether it continues to work even when you're not. Until you understand that distinction, hard work will always feel exhausting and strangely unfulfilling. Hard work is often treated as the ultimate virtue, and in many ways it is. It builds discipline, it builds skill, it builds resilience, but there's a critical distinction that almost no one explains. Hard work increases output, leverage multiplies results. Most people are taught to focus on effort. Very few are taught to think about scale. When you trade time for money, your income is limited by hours. There are only so many hours in a day. only so much energy you can give. You can work faster, you can work longer, you can even work harder than everyone around you. But eventually, you hit a ceiling. That ceiling is time. This is why two people can work equally hard and end up with completely different outcomes. One applies effort in a way that scales, the other applies effort in a way that doesn't. Think about the difference between climbing stairs and taking an elevator. Both require effort, but one multiplies movement. Leverage is anything that allows your effort to keep working after you stop. It might be systems, skills, ownership, technology, media, capital. Hard work without leverage is exhausting because every gain resets to zero the next day. You wake up, you work, you get paid, and then it starts again. Nothing carries forward. Leverage changes that. With leverage, a single action can produce results repeatedly. Effort compounds instead of disappearing. This is why business owners, investors, creators, and system builders can outpace even the hardest workers, not because they work less, but because their effort is amplified. And here's the part that makes this uncomfortable. Most people never seek leverage because it feels uncertain. Leverage requires delayed results. It often looks inefficient at first, and it rarely provides immediate validation. Hard work feels safer because it produces instant feedback. You work, you're paid, you feel productive. Leverage often feels like nothing is happening, until suddenly something does. This is why people cling to effort-based progress. It feels tangible, predictable, earned. But effort alone rarely changes trajectory. It only improves position slightly within the same lane. Leverage is what allows you to change lanes entirely. And once you understand that, a lot of things start to make sense. Why some people seem to move ahead quickly. Why others stay busy but stuck. Why working harder often feels like running faster on a treadmill. Hard work is not the enemy, but without leverage, it's incomplete. The goal isn't to avoid effort. The goal is to place effort where it multiplies. Most people assume that their life is shaped by big moments. The job they took, the relationship that ended, the opportunity they missed. But in reality, most lives aren't defined by dramatic turning points. They're shaped by small, repeated decisions that rarely feel important at the time. The choices made in ordinary moments. What you do after work. How you spend your money. Where your attention goes when no one is watching. These decisions don't announce themselves as life-changing. They feel harmless, routine, even deserved. A small purchase here, a night of distraction there, another delay until later. Individually, none of these choices matter much. Collectively, they shape everything. This is where hard work quietly gets undermined. Someone can be incredibly disciplined during the day, only to undo progress in the margins. Not through recklessness, but through comfort. The problem isn't indulgence, it's unconscious repetition. Time is spent consuming instead of creating. Money is spent relieving stress instead of building options. Energy is used recovering from work instead of building leverage beyond it. None of this feels like failure. It feels normal, and that's what makes it powerful. Because while effort happens in visible places, progress often happens in invisible ones. A person who reads instead of scrolls, who learns instead of numbs, who builds quietly while others recover loudly. Over time, those invisible choices compound, not dramatically, gradually. And that's why the gap widens so slowly at first that it's barely noticeable. Two people start in the same place. They earn similar incomes. They work similar hours. But one uses their spare capacity to build something that lasts. The other uses it to cope with the pressure of the system they're in. Neither feels wrong, but one accumulates options. The other accumulates fatigue. This is where most people get confused. They assume progress should feel intense. They assume change should be obvious. But the most powerful shifts are quiet. They happen in how you spend an hour, in how you treat surplus, in whether today looks exactly like yesterday. Hard work often gets all the credit. But it's these small, unglamorous decisions that decide whether effort compounds or disappears. And once you see that, it becomes clear why so many hardworking people stay stuck. Not because they lack discipline, but because their daily choices pull against their long-term direction. One of the most confusing things about money is how uneven the outcomes are. Two people can earn similar incomes, work similar hours, live in similar places. Yet 10 or 20 years later, their lives look completely different. One has options, the other has obligations. From the outside, this gap often gets explained away as luck. Right place, right time, right connections. But in most cases, the difference is far less dramatic. It comes down to what each person does with what they have left after effort. Income is only one part of the equation. What matters more is how that income is directed. Some people use surplus to reduce friction. They buy convenience, comfort, relief. Others use surplus to build assets. Not necessarily financial assets at first. Skills, systems, ownership, things that continue to work over time. This is why the same salary can produce very different futures. One path consumes income to make the present easier. The other redirects income to make the future lighter. Neither choice feels extreme, but the long-term effect is. The person who prioritizes comfort often feels wealthier in the short term. Life feels smoother. Stress is reduced, but their money stops working the moment it's spent. The person who prioritizes ownership often feels poorer at first. They delay gratification. They accept inconvenience. But their money, time, and energy start to accumulate momentum. This is where people misunderstand wealth. Wealth isn't stored in bank balances, it's stored in systems. Things that produce value without constant input. This might be a business, investments, intellectual property, a personal brand, a valuable skill set. These don't require constant effort to exist. They require effort to build, and once built, they change everything. This is why working harder often doesn't close the gap. Effort increases income slightly. Systems change trajectory entirely. The wealth gap isn't created by how much people earn. It's created by what happens after earning. And that's why advice focused purely on hustle often fails. It ignores the direction of effort. It assumes more energy will solve a structural problem. But structure always wins. People who understand this don't necessarily work less. They just stop pouring all of their energy into things that reset to zero. They build once, then let time do the heavy lifting. Once people understand that effort alone isn't enough, something important happens. The pressure eases. They stop asking, "Why am I not doing enough?" and start asking, "Is this effort actually taking me where I want to go?" That shift changes everything. Because the goal was never to work endlessly. It was to build a life that doesn't require constant effort just to stay afloat. This is where thinking long-term becomes more powerful than working harder. Instead of asking how to earn more this month, the question becomes how to build something that keeps earning next year. Instead of trying to optimize every hour, the focus moves to creating leverage that makes time less fragile. This doesn't require drastic action, or quitting everything, or chasing the latest opportunity. It starts with positioning, where you place your attention, where you invest surplus energy, what you choose to build slowly instead of consume quickly. Leverage grows quietly. At first it feels inefficient, unrewarding, invisible, but over time it compounds. This is why the most meaningful changes rarely feel urgent. They feel subtle, a skill practiced consistently, a system improved gradually, an audience built patiently. None of these produce instant results, but they change the direction of your life, and direction matters more than speed. Once effort is placed into things that scale, the relationship with work changes. Work stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like construction. You're no longer running just to stay in place. You're building something that exists beyond today. This is the moment where hard work becomes powerful again. Not because there's more of it, but because it's aligned. Aligned with ownership, aligned with compounding, aligned with the future you want, not just the present you're managing. And that's the difference most people never get taught. Most people don't struggle because they're lazy. They struggle because they were taught the wrong rules. Rules that reward effort, but not leverage. Rules that praise endurance, but ignore direction. Once you see that, it becomes easier to be patient with yourself. You stop chasing intensity, you stop blaming effort, and you start thinking in terms of positioning. This channel exists for that reason, not to promise shortcuts, not to sell motivation, but to explore how small decisions, applied consistently, shape very different lives. Life isn't just about how hard you work, it's about where that work is placed. Money isn't just about income, it's about structure. And decisions, especially the quiet ones, are what determine whether effort compounds or disappears. If these ideas resonate, you're in the right place. New videos will continue to break down how thinking clearly about life, money, and decisions changes outcomes over time. If you want to keep exploring that, you can subscribe. No pressure, no urgency, just better thinking over time.